Is Iran a Muslim country? Well, our guest today, Dr. Farhad Rezaei, I hope I'm saying that correctly. He is a political scientist and he's an Iranian and he's a Christian. And he has a very interesting story about how he became a Christian in Iran, which he'll talk about in this episode. But he points out what a lot of Iranians know is that Iranians are not Muslim on the whole, and they're not very religious on the whole. And so he helps us think through a lot of what's going on in the religious setting within Iran and how the house churches in Iran, and then how that might actually have implications for what's been happening in the news and this war with Iran. He's a very sober-minded guy, has lots of great insights. He knows what he's talking about. If this has been helpful for you, this podcast or this YouTube channel, we ask that you would like and subscribe. And if you want to give, you can give at thebiblicalmind.com/give. Stay tuned.
This is the Biblical Mind Podcast, produced by the Center for Hebraic Thought. Honest 5-star reviews help others find this podcast. Visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org for articles and videos that explore the deep structures of Scripture.
So that's an interesting question because, when it comes to Iran, people outside Iran think that it's an Islamic country. But in reality, it's not. Actually, let me show you something. According to one survey by a research center that is called Gaman, it's a research institute I think it's in Netherlands, that is overseen by an Iranian professor of political science. And in 2020, he conducted a research survey. And according to this survey, only 37% of the population identified themselves as Muslim.
Wow.
Yes, 32% as Shia Muslim and 5% as Sunni Muslim. The rest, no, they're not. They identified themselves as either, 22%, 22.2%, they identified as non-believers. Just
nothing.
They believe in nothing.
The nuns. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. 7.7% are Zoroastrians. So Zoroastrians, for those who are not familiar with this religion, this is the old Iranian religion before Islam coming to take over Iran by force. And 8.8% are identified themselves as atheists, 7.1% spirituals, 5.8% agnostics, and the rest are Jewish, Baha'is, Christians, humanists, mysticals, and etc. So Iran, again, from outside world, people think that it's an Islamic country, but in reality, it's actually not. And what I can tell you that might be surprising to your audience and viewers is that Iran is the fastest Christianity growing in the world. The fastest. Why I say the fastest, and it's not just me. I mean, many Iran watchers, especially those who, focus on the religious aspect of Iran, since 1979 that Islamists came to power, there was only 500 Christian converts. Just only 500 people who were known as Christian converts. But what about now? It's something between 3 to 5 million Christian converts in Iran. I mean, look, this is a religious revolution. It's a religious revolution. 3 to 5 million. And then, look, if you ask me personally, I would say it's even more than that. Because there is no official statistic on this, but it's just like, it's a matter of, unofficial and unconfirmed reports. But it's something between 3 to 5 million Iranians who converted to Christianity.
Are there any supremely negative consequences for converting to Christianity there? I mean, if there's a lot of non-religious people probably, I would imagine they don't care as much.
The penalty for conversion from Islam to any religion, including Christianity, is death. That's the capital punishment.
Hmm.
Those people who convert to Christianity, they either have to keep it secret or they have to worship in something that they call house churches. Because there is no way that they can go to legacy churches for a number of reasons. One reason is that if they are identified by the government as the person who has converted to Christianity, then at best, if he is really lucky, he will end up in prison. If unlucky, he will be hanged.
Wow.
Another reason is that the government, since they noticed the huge number of Iranians converted to Christianity, they forced the legacy church not to allow them to attend the Sunday worships, Sunday services. So for that purpose, they came up with this idea that they have to stay in and make their own churches at home, something that they call it house churches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they worship. Because if they go to the legacy churches, not only they are not allowed, but they will be identified and they will end up in a horrible place.
So I imagine the legacy churches we're talking about, Roman Catholic, Orthodox,
Armenians,
yeah.
Assyrians, yes.
And so the people who were already in those traditions during the time of the Shah, and when the revolution takes place, they kind of get grandfathered in, as we would say, as they're okay, but no new converts can come to those churches.
No new converts. Even those legacy Christians, their number at the time of the Shah, before the Islamic revolution took place in 1979, their number was really higher than what they are now. I don't know the exact number, but they were close to 500,000 Christians. But now they are less than 200,000.
Okay.
And that's because of the regime's repression. Many of them were forced to leave Iran. Many of them were, imprisoned. They were tortured. They were, they gone through horrible treatment by the regime. The regime forced them to sell their property and to leave the country. The regime imposed them Islamic lifestyle that they don't like. So for instance, they forced them to adhere to Islamic hijab, something that is not required for Christians, but they were forced to follow this Islamic rule. So now Christian women in Iran, they have to obey the Sharia law when it comes to hijab. And many of the Christian girls were forced to marry Muslim men. So, I mean, look, the treatment of Christians, and not just Christians, other religious minorities, Jews, Baha'is, it's horrible by the regime. And yeah, that's why the number diminished dramatically. For instance, the number of Jews who were living in Iran prior to the revolution, they were approximately 100,000 Jewish people. But now they are just less than 3,000 people.
It's hard to imagine a single Jew living in Iran right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now even those 3,000 people who are living in there, they are constantly monitored. They're not allowed. They're not allowed to hold an Iranian passport because the regime is regime is scared that they might leave or they might go to Turkey. Look, generally speaking, the regime views religious minorities, especially Christians and Jews, as the agents of the so-called Zionism and the United States. So for that purpose, they are heavily monitored. They are not allowed to exit the country unless, they have to provide a legitimate reason that why are you going to Turkey? For what purpose? What are you going to do there? Who are you going to meet? I mean, it's something equivalent to the Stalinist era that people were living in constant fear
Yeah.
That's how, unfortunately, the situation for religious minorities is in Iran.
Okay, listen up, all you who are in undergraduate or graduate theological education. This episode is sponsored by Every Voice, which is a center for kingdom diversity in Christian theological education. Every Voice is dedicated to amplifying the voices of ethnic minority and majority world scholars and to equipping students to living out their calling. On their website, you'll find a free searchable database featuring biblical and theological scholarship from diverse voices around the world. It's an easy way to engage global perspectives on Scripture and theology, and to think more carefully and faithfully alongside the global body of Christ. Every Voice also invests directly in students through a free year-long mentoring program. Each cohort meets monthly with a scholar mentor and fellow students from around the world. Together, they learn how to navigate academia, develop conference papers, and cultivate the habits they need to flourish in their calling. Applications for the 2026 and 2027 mentoring year are now open. Students from undergraduates all the way up through doctoral programs are encouraged to apply. The program is completely free for those who can commit to the monthly meetings. This year's mentors include Dr. Danny Carroll. We love Danny Carroll, a respected Old Testament scholar and commentator, and Dr. May Young, an accomplished Old Testament scholar. Space is limited, so do not wait. Visit everyvoicekingdomdiversity.org/mentoring to learn more and apply today. That's everyvoicekingdomdiversity.org/mentoring. I think it's difficult for us in the so-called West to imagine that Yemen, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq used to have there were Jewish populations in all of these countries.
That's right.
And it's only been, the last 50 years or so. And in some places like Yemen, it's been the last 15 years, 20 years that they've all been kind of forced out. So let's do a little cultural analysis for a second. The language of Iran, the official language is not Arabic. It's
not.
It's Farsi, correct?
It's Farsi or Persian, as it's called outside Iran.
Yeah. So I'm interested in this. This is a really silly question, but okay. So maybe I am one of those Shia or Sunni Muslims who is very devout. I do all the practices. That means at some point in my life, I will have to have learned Arabic, or how to read it at least, and how to pray in Arabic as a second language so that I can read the Quran. Because if I'm only reading the Farsi version, then I'm not technically reading the real Quran. Is that correct?
So Arabic language became compulsory in educational curriculum in Iran after the 1979 revolution, because the regime forced Iranians to learn Islamic language and Sharia law and everything. And then one thing that this issue actually created, it actually turned out to be something, in favor of Christians. So they forced the public to learn Arabic and to adhere to the Islamic teachings and to do everything that the government wants to get more familiar with Islamic teaching and things. And now something really interesting happened. Actually, two things happened. One thing was that the more Iranians have learned about Islam and Sharia law, the more they understood that this is not what they want. This is not what their culture wants. Culturally, this is really, really strange to them. This was somehow a blessing when it comes to, the mass movement of Iranian people towards Christianity. So they learned that, no. This is really, strange to our culture. Prior to the revolution, yes, they were identified as Muslims, but just look on paper.
Right.
They did not read Quran because they did not know Arabic. They were not familiar with the teaching of Islam with Sharia law. But when the regime forced our kids and the people to adhere to Islamic and Sharia law, to learn it in the school, then suddenly people realize that, oh my God, this is not what we wanted. This is not. This is a sharp contrast to our culture. So they decided to move away from Islam. This is one of the reasons of the mass exodus of Iranians to Christianity. Another issue was that during the time of the Shah, when clerics were not in charge, they did not run the country. They always, in the mosque, they talked about the good part of Islam. Islam is religion of peace, and etc. But once they came to power, they realized that they're just lying. What they say is totally different with what they are doing. Mullahs are corrupt. They are violent. They preach peace, but what they are doing is entirely opposite with peace. So that was the second reason that, they decided to give up on Islam and to move to other religions. Many of them, as I mentioned earlier, between 3 to 5 million of Iranians embraced Christianity. Of course, there were some others who were more nationalist. They returned back to Zoroastrianism. Many of them, they entirely gave up on any religion. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting also that, Iran, which is a modern nation state, but the area also has deep roots in Christianity as well. I mean, it was Iranian missionaries that went to China in the 7th century and brought Christianity into China, right? So I wonder if there's some sense that Christianity can be viewed as a very ancient religion within the borders.
For sure. That's right.
And so if I'm a Christian and I'm going to a house church, what am I reading? What are we talking about? What are we doing as far as, if you can give us just a sample of an average house church, if there is such a thing.
Well, there are such things. There are house churches, as I mentioned, for an obvious reason, because they cannot worship in public. They cannot go to legacy churches. So they eventually decided to worship in secret, which is, these places that are called house churches. So what they are doing, they gather, and that's exclusively for the Christian converts. Probably there are some, missionaries, foreign missionaries going there. I am not aware of it, but I heard some stories that missionaries are going, of course, not now, because, the government, has put in place strict policies that if foreigners go in, they are questioned, they are monitored. So this story is for the past. So they are reading Bible, they are, worshiping just like Sunday services in church, and that's what they are doing. So Bible study is their main practice and activity.
Yeah. And okay, so just entertain me for a second. Where are they? Are they reading equally from the Old Testament and the New Testament, or are they predominantly a New Testament? Because this is part of an issue with Palestinian Christianity. It tends to be much more Actually, it's part of the problem with a lot of American churches as well. They are all New Testament and no Old Testament.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to this question, because look, the time that I came out of Iran, it's been almost 2 decades. Right? Since then, many things have changed. And I myself have never attended house churches in Iran because, my story is different. But these are kind of stories that I am, reading and hearing from friends who converted and attended these kind of house churches. But probably it's just mostly New Testament. I have never heard any story that they are, studying Old Testament and that sort of things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And speaking of you and your relationship to Iran, you became a Christian while you were still in Iran. That's correct?
Look, my story is just a little different. When I talk about myself, I hardly can call myself a Christian convert for a specific reason. I was born in a Muslim family, but not not a Muslim family that many people think. My father, although on paper he was a Muslim, but in reality he was not. He had a lot of Jewish and Christian friends in my hometown, and he has learned a lot of stories from Bible. And all I remember, he just taught us stories from Bible. He talked about Jesus a
Oh, wow.
lot, and many things related to Christianity. Honestly, I don't remember. I cannot remember one single story that my dad told us about anything other than Christianity. So, am I a Christian convert? Probably no. I don't call myself a Christian convert because, I have never been a Muslim. I have never learned anything about Islam except as a part of my study, I learned about Islam, but not as a person who is, practicing Islam. So that is my story. I have heard a lot of good stories about Christianity from my father. My father himself never considered himself a Muslim. So to tell you when I converted to Islam, that's something that I myself cannot tell you. That is my
Wow.
story.
I mean, that's fascinating. Also, I think a lot of people's brains are melting right now because they probably cannot, they don't have the categories in place to conceptualize a Muslim family that doesn't practice Islam, just talks about Bible stories and not the Quran and Hadith, and then which makes it a very natural path for you in some ways to mature into Christianity as well. It's just not the caricature we have in our minds of what's going on in Iraq.
I totally understand. As I said, many people outside Iran, especially people in the West, they think that Iranians are Muslims. The way that they think, let's say, people in Iraq are Muslim, in Saudi Arabia or in Syria, other Islamic countries. But the truth is that even that 47% of Iranians who identified themselves as Muslims, they are not even considered as a true Muslim by other Muslims in Saudi Arabia. Why?
Right.
Because they are secular in nature. Majority of those 47%, they even did not recite Quran for once. They don't understand it at all. This is the nature of Iranians. They are secular in nature. They are not like... And I understand why people make this mistake. It's because of the government. We have a regime in power, the ruling system, that are, zealot, violent Islamists, jihadists. And unfortunately, they have been, they became the decoy, the face of Iran. That's why many people think that, okay, all of these people are, jihadists, zealots who don't like the West and don't like Christians, don't like Jews. But no, the story is totally different.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think, is there another nation or culture like this where we think it's one thing, but it's a completely different thing on the inside? And well, certainly, is it true, statistically speaking, that your most zealous Shia Muslims are probably in Iraq, living in Iraq? Would that be correct?
Well, I would say no. They are in Iran. They're mostly
They are in Iran. Okay.
Yes, in the religious city of Qom and partly in Mashhad.
Okay, but they're going to
Remember,
make
when it comes to
pilgrimage to
Shi'ism,
Karbala, right?
sorry?
These are the people that are going to be making pilgrimage to Karbala, right?
Exactly. Let me tell
Okay.
you something about about Shi'ism. Shi'ism traditionally, they were quietists, meaning that they believed in non-interference in politics, doing nothing related to politics, and stay away from everything politics. They were peaceful. They were known as quietists. But from the time that Khomeini came to power, we're dealing with new Shi'ism, which is known as Khomeinism. It came with Ayatollah Khomeini, who was a radical Shiist who believed in civilizational jihad, who believed in the destruction of the state of Israel and recapture of Jerusalem, because he thought that this is the prerequisite for the coming of the second Messiah of
Right.
of Shi'ism, which is, Mahdi, the 12th Imam. So
Right.
when we talk about Shi'ism, this new version of Shi'ism is in Iran. The one that it is in Iraq, that they are mostly adhere to quietism. You
Okay.
see, yes,
Which is
Ayatollah
why they got
Ali
abused
Sistani,
by Saddam Hussein, right? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean
exactly.
to talk over you.
Ayatollah Ali Sistani, who is the prominent Shia cleric in Iraq. He's just mostly away from politics. He told his followers not to interfere in politics, to stay away from everything related to the political establishment and everything. So this
Huh.
is the difference between the Iranian Shiism and the Iraqi Shiism.
And Shi'ism, unlike Sunni Islam, has a view of a Messiah that is to come. They
That's
see
true.
themselves as the persecuted minority from the
Exactly.
Sunnis persecute them. Yeah. So it is wild that you have this militant, rabidly militant regime that rises up. It also, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the political studies scholar. This also kind of helps explain why you have a Shia group in Iran that is teaming up with Sunnis in Israel and Palestinian territories in Gaza as well, right?
So this is true. As I said, for new Shiism or Khomeinism, the destruction of the state of Israel, the recapturing of Jerusalem and returning it to the hands of Muslims is the prerequisite for the return of Mahdi, the Shia 12 Imam. So Khomeinists in Iran believe that for this goal, it is okay to team up with Sunni extremist groups like Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas, who are also want to destroy the state of Israel. So the goal here for Iranian Shiites is something, religious. For the Sunnis like Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, that's something geopolitical.
Yeah, it's
They
just
want,
practical.
yes, they want to, as they always, their slogan reads, from the river to the sea. It's always everything belongs to the Palestinians. So they want something. Their goal is geopolitical. For Iranians, the goal is something purely religious.
It just dawned on me when you said this that turning kind of to the current situation, we have in the American government right now, there looks like there is some evidence that the executive branch also has an eschatological view of what they're doing in Iran. I mean, there's some of the things that the Secretary of Defense is saying where he's plugging this into Christian eschatology and that, they're bringing about the apocalypse, et cetera, that you might have two apocalyptic worldviews going head to head right now between Iran and the United States. What do you think of that? You can tell me I'm completely wrong. I have no idea.
Look, I look at this particular issue from a political perspective. I don't know what Pete Hegseth said. Honestly, I've never heard that, but I am sure you are right. You've heard it. But I look at this issue, the war, the current developments from a political perspective, and I believe the reason that the United States, in a joint military operation with Israel, decided to attack Iran has to do with things related to, for instance, Iran's nuclear ambitions. They for the bigger part of the regime, the bigger part of the life of the regime since 1979, they tried to to obtain nuclear weapon. They advanced their ballistic missile program, which is another component of a nuclear program, and they also sponsored terrorism. So I believe that this time around, whether Pete Hegseth has something eschatological in his mind or something else, I see it this way, that Iran was in a whole different situation, in a very dangerous place. It was about to acquire nuclear weapon, which would be really, really bad from the strategic perspective. And this war was a kind of necessity. And I think it's understandable. I'm not trying to say that it's legitimate. I'm
Right.
trying because I am an analyst. I don't want
Right.
to side with any part of this
Right.
this operation, but I am trying to make sense of it. That why it happened. It happened for a simple reason, because Iranian people with this kind of mindset, with this kind of religious perspective, who want to destroy Israel, they were super close to obtaining nuclear weapon,
Yeah.
and they should have been stopped by any chance, by any means.
And I think there is a version of this discussion in America, again, from people who are pretty detached from the realities in Iran, who might say just like, well, Iran, they wouldn't actually launch a nuclear weapon at Israel. It's just a, like mutually assured self-destruction kind of thing. So do you have a sense as to whether there's rhetoric and then there's what they actually do? Which do you think it falls in with the nuclear weapons?
That's actually a good point. I remember I wrote an article about this particular issue a few years ago, maybe like over 5 years ago, that whether the MAD, mutual assured destruction, works with the Iranian regime or not. Look, you have to look at it from this perspective. In many occasions, the leaders of the regime said if they have a nuclear weapon, they would not hesitate to destroy Israel, right?
Hmm.
And then we have a people who think that no matter you will die or you will kill your opponents, the infidels, you will end up in paradise. How can you deal with this kind of people?
Right.
And then they clearly said their intention that if they had the nuclear weapon, they would destroy the Strait of Israel and they would destroy the United States. I mean, if they say it, why you shouldn't believe it, right?
Right.
And then in action, you can also see that, oh my God, this regime does not follow rational, the kind of rationality that we have in the West. MAD is a Western rationality. The
Right.
regime in Iran does not follow that pattern, right?
Right.
Look at them
It is.
right now. They are now bombing Israel with cluster bombs, which is being prohibited by international law, right?
Right.
Imagine that this regime that is at the verge of collapse uses a kind of munition that is prohibited by international law. Why we should think that they would not use nuclear weapon if they have it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I have a couple questions that I want to run by you after you said. I mean that kind of it's funny that what you said about the rationality of diplomacy here. There's a parallel to this in when the United States created the M16 assault rifle that you use in the infantry and that everybody carries in the military. It's a very small bullet, and in some ways, it's it's not very good for, like, I used to work in the Amazon jungle. Like, the bullet is so small that it gets deflected by a leaf, kind of thing.
Just like a
Um,
pellet gun.
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, there are pellet guns that have almost a similar diameter of bullet, but the thinking behind that was it's a small bullet, but it topples and it'll wound people. And the goal is if you wound one of the enemy, it takes 2 to 3 people to pull that person out.
Yeah.
And then in
They say
Vietnam,
Russians say the same story about Kalashnikov.
yeah, exactly. Kalashnikov is doing something very similar. And then in Vietnam, my dad was an infantryman in Vietnam. He said, well, the problem with that is it assumes that they care about their wounded, right? That they they actually are going to go get that person. And that's, I think, a open question. Would they follow the road of Hamas, where they just say, no, martyrdom, we to die for this cause is an honor, even if you're a civilian. So all the more the merrier. I also was talking to a friend of mine who has connections in Iran, and I was just puzzling over this issue, all of the murders of the protesters in the streets and the oppression of the protesters. I'm trying to imagine, like, what kind of people. It's almost like a super villain movie. Like, what kind of people gets henchmen to go out in the streets and point a machine gun at people who are protesting and just kill them? And he said, he said it's not it's not, a lot of them are not Iranians. They're actually Syrian mercenaries. Have you ever heard this before?
Well, we know for the fact that Iranian regime and its military organ, the IRGC, has lots of proxy networks, right? They
Right.
have Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Hamas. They have Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq. They have Fatimiyun and Zainabiyun that were, active in Syria. Now they're back in Iran. They did not go back. Fatimiyun and Zainabiyun were militias from Shiites in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. But
Oh.
once they lost Syria, they did not go back to Afghanistan and Pakistan. They went to Iran. So they built this network of proxies for a reason, to defend the regime, no matter outside of Iran or inside Iran. And there are many reports by by uh, by Iran watchers and also by people inside Iran that many of the people of the militias who participated in the killing of Iranian protesters, they were not speaking Farsi. They were speaking Arabic. So what conclusion can you make? Right? And then let's go back to the issue of the rationality, MAD rationality of this regime. If a regime in 2 single days kills over 40,000 Iranians, just imagine, in 2 single days, do you really believe that this regime would not use nuclear weapons against its adversaries?
Right.
Right?
Yeah. No, that all adds up, which leads me to the other thing I've heard from several people who have left Iran, and they said basically before the strikes were happening. Is again, I don't take sides either. I'm only trying to figure out what's actually going on the ground. They said that the common feeling of your average Iranian was, yeah, bomb the heck out of Iran, like come do
Yes.
it. Well, for the Americans to do it, like they're not worried about the Americans, mainly because they knew Americans would be more strategic. They'd avoid carpet bombing, et cetera. Do you get that sense as well?
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Actually, Iranian people are really, really happy with this current, U.S. and Israeli strikes. And then let me tell you something. You can actually Google it after we're done with this conversation, that when the joint operation killed Khamenei and it was announced that Khamenei was dead, you just cannot imagine. Iranians flooded the street with dancing and holding placards saying thank you President Trump, thank you Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're really happy. And also Iranians in diaspora, they are getting together, they're dancing, they're super happy, and they thank Israelis and Americans for taking out Khamenei and the rest of the leadership, political and the military leadership, for an obvious reason. Iranians people are fed up with this regime. It's a regime that suppressed them. It's a regime that gives their money to terror groups to use against Israel, to use against American forces in the region, while that money is desperately needed inside Iran. Iran now is facing a lot of crises: water crisis, environmental crisis, social crisis, a lot of crises. And this big country with huge resources, people are living in absolute poverty. You just cannot imagine that more than 2/3 of the population are living below the line of poverty. That means more than 60 million people. Iranian population is 92 million people. So 2/3 of it would be how much? Would be like more than
60 million plus.
60, 70 million. So a country with a lot of natural resources, oil and gas, now people are living in absolute poverty. And at the same time, they are watching that the regime provides Hezbollah with $1 billion per year, provide Hamas with a lot of money. In one case, the regime provided $30 million per month. That makes like $400 million per year to Hamas for one single reason. That's not their annual budget. That is just specifically provided to Hamas only to gather intelligence on Israeli missile program. And another $400 million was given to Hamas as an annual budget. And Iranians are watching. And they see that money is desperately needed inside, but the regime does not care.
Right.
The regime cares more to the Arabs in Iraq, to the Syrians, to the Palestinians, rather than their own people.
Yeah.
So it's normal for them to be happy.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I was going to ask you if you could give us some things that we could pray about for our Iranian brothers and sisters, both Christians and not in Iran. And I think I think you gave us quite a few things that we can specifically pray for them. I wonder, what is your overall assessment of the situation, the war? Where do you think this is going to go? What do you think the pinch points are going to be for Iran? And I don't hear a lot of hopefulness that Iran is going to cave in and say, okay, we're giving up our ambitions. I don't know what
Look,
else is going to happen.
You can look at what is going on in Iran in two different perspectives. One perspective is that, okay, the regime is still there, right? They're not going to cave in. They're going to resist and they're going to survive. Okay, I don't mind if people make that assessment and that conclusion. It's fine. But my assessment is that when we talk about the regime in Iran, what regime are we talking about? The top political leadership is gone. The top military leadership is gone. The regime's military power is diminished close to zero. It's the sky is in full control of the United States and Israel, right? The missile program is diminished. The drone program is destroyed. And that is the current situation in Iran. And when we talk about, look, I personally think that many things depend on the United States, whether, because of the nature of decision-making by President Trump, we're not really sure whether he's going to call off the operation by tomorrow, or he would just say, you know what, we're going to go ahead until the regime is entirely dismantled.
That was a very polite way to say it, because the nature of the decision-making mechanisms of President Trump. Yes, so we have no idea on that front, right?
We still have no idea what President Trump is going to do, and of course that's one of the important factors. But apart from that, when we talk about the Islamic Republic, and this is the title of the regime, it's not there anymore, right? Look, when we talk about Islamic Republic, that consists of the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei, who was the single decision maker, who was behind almost 95% of the chaos inside Iran and outside of Iran. He's not around anymore. There are reports that his son, who said he took over just few days after the demise of his father, they announced that he took over. There are reports that he's also dead. Okay? And the Revolutionary Guards, as an organization that controls Iran's economy, that has military power, political power, that's also being dismantled, almost, right? So what we are going to talk about is this regime, if it remains, the worst case scenario, if it's going to be there, is it going to be the same? I would say no. This regime would change dramatically, because they understand that if they continue with that policy, they should expect the same strike in few months. So I am assuming that if they survive, they have to change, right?
So we're all going to be watching and waiting to see what emerges as this regime, and then how, obviously, Israel and America respond to these new leaders as they emerge. Well, Farhad, thank you so much for explaining. I hope you will come back on this podcast later to teach us more about Iran, Christianity in Iran, and to help us think through these things, because I think for a lot of us, we just feel so clueless as to what is going on and what we should even think about things. So I appreciate.
Somehow I understand that why many people in the West are somehow clueless, not entirely, but somehow they kept in dark when it comes to Iran. Part of it is because of the legacy media. Unfortunately, their coverage of Iran is not satisfying. for example, right now, if you look at the New York Times, some other Atlantic or some other legacy medias, you will notice that, oh my God, Iran is winning, and the United States and Israel are, being defeated. But the reality is something entirely different. But anyway, it's my pleasure. Every time that you want me to be with you, it's my pleasure. I will be more than happy to join again.
Really appreciate your wisdom. Thanks, Farhad.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Biblical Mind podcast, exploring the deep structures of Christian scripture. For more, visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org. Subscribe to this podcast at all the usual places so you never miss an episode.